Now, I grew up listening to people call my father a genius. And he was a pretty miserable and at times sadistic person. And was so pretty much as I knew him. He was unhappy, he was pouting, he was vindictive, he enjoyed punishing other people, he was relatively immature, not terribly responsible in the sense I rarely heard him apologize. And he used verbal articulating to make other people feel small. And as I say that, I wonder, how much do I do that as well? And the thing with the current definition of intelligence, meaning you got a degree in mathematics, oh, aren't you intelligent? One study shows that people with the most degrees are more likely to be miserable than a peasant, for example, a peasant farmer on a Mexican farm. That if you look at just the enjoyment of daily life, that you have the tortured genius. Well, what do people want out of their life? They want to feel good, and they don't want to feel bad. Now, if intelligence is a good thing, then it's not something that makes you feel worse than other people who are less intelligent. My father relayed a narrative with one of the higher-ups in the Anthroposophical Society that he was interested in, the general work of Rudolf Steiner. And he asked, that upper echelon, he said, is there any definition or is there any distinction between pain and consciousness? Or is pain and consciousness corollary? And they couldn't give him an answer, and he kind of left with the sense that, the more they studied and the more they learned, the more pain they felt. And so, that's fine with conventional definitions of intelligence. You got an A in mathematics. You spelled all the words correctly. But this is not an intelligent definition of intelligence. Given the fact that every human being in the history of humanity wants to feel good and doesn't want to feel bad, then a more intelligent way of ranking intelligence is how well are you doing with your primary goal. Because if we said that, for example, a fisherman had a primary goal of catching fish, and one went out and caught a lot of fish in 5 hours, and the other person caught no fish in 5 days, who would we say is the more intelligent fisherman? Well, we'd say the one who caught more fish in less time. Why? Because that was their goal. Now, if the goal of every human being, spoken or implicit, is to feel good and not to feel bad, then someone who feels very good a lot of the time and doesn't feel bad very often is more intelligent, period. So then we get to say, well, then what's the algorithm for measuring that? And the algorithm that makes sense to me is the efficiency, that intelligence can be measured by the efficiency with which a person transforms energy into human well-being. Because, let's say, for example, going back to the fisherman, so one fisherman caught, a ton of fish in 5 hours, and the other person didn't catch a single fish in 5 days. Well, we say, okay, the one is more intelligent, but then we discount things. We say, well, wait a minute. The first person had 5 fishing boats. They had dynamite. The second person had a canoe and a hook and line. And then we say, well, we can't. They're not playing on a level field. So if you're trying to measure the merits or intelligence of the person, you've got to level the playing field. So let's send them both out with 5 boats and sticks of dynamite and blah 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 blah, or let's send them both out with a canoe and hook and line. Same brand of hook and line. It's the same kind of thing in the Olympics. We don't say to a sprinter, they're the best sprinter in the world because they jump on a motorbike and race to the finish line, and then the other one's running, breathlessly behind, and say, "Oh, you're just not a very good runner." No, we say no drugs, and so we honor what we honor in excellence, which I think has a lot to do with intelligence. What we honor in excellence and in sports is we honor the efficiency of maximizing a healthy goal, which the root of which is to feel good and not to feel bad. The efficiency of achieving a healthy goal within a level playing field. So we all have a human body, and it's not really a level playing field when you take genes into account and height into account, but we call that close enough. And so intelligence is the efficiency of transforming energy into human well-being. So if we measure intelligence in this way, then we say, okay, you've got $100 and you've got $100. You've got 8 hours and you've got 8 hours. So you've got units of time, that's a form of energy. You've got units of money, that's a form of energy. And you've both got a set of clothes. Those are natural resources. So you've got a set of clothes, you've both got $100, you've both got 8 hours. So who's the most intelligent person in that time? Well, one person could just sit on the curb feeling bored and depressed and say, okay, I'm sure I'm going to lose and I'm not enjoying this. And someone else could go out and start a business with $100 that they then use to put their family, move their family into a better house or something like that. And then we see a happy family versus a lonely individual, and we say, this person is more intelligent. They took the opportunity on an equal playing field, and they made more of the opportunity. And then we might say that in a nonprofit, that donors donate $1 million to 2 nonprofits, and they're both trying to save the rainforest. Well, one person leased 100 million acres of land, making payments, etc., and the other went out and bought a bit of rainforest they didn't look at, and it turned out the trees had already been cut down. It was just labeled rainforest, but the clear cutting had happened in that, and they didn't even bother to inspect it, and so there's really nothing being preserved with that 100 million. And they bought it at a high price because they didn't understand real estate negotiation. And you say, well, why would you invest your money with the nonprofit that secured 100 million acres on a lease? Well, because they're getting the job done. And why protect the rainforest? Because it's good for the global air system. Why do we care about that? Because it increases human well-being. To live on a planet that has clean air is to feel better and not feel worse, meaning it's consistent with the goal of feeling good and not feeling bad, as opposed to breathing in nuclear waste and coal fumes and having volatile temperatures with regular hurricanes because there's no forest canopy to soften the volatility of temperature, because all storms correlate with volatility of temperatures. So when you have a very hot front and a very cold front meet, you get a storm. Well, every bit of forest canopy decreases the gap between the hot and the cold by regulating a slower increase and decrease in temperature. In the desert, it goes from freezing cold at night to burning hot in the morning almost instantly. In a forest, it doesn't get as cold at night and it doesn't get as hot during the day. There are less temperature volatiles and as a result, less storms. It's not intelligent to build a house every day and have it blow down in a storm. It's not intelligent to build a house every 10 years and have it blow down in a storm. So it's not intelligent to design a global ecology that makes storms 10 times more intense and more common. It's just intelligent. And we get that at some level, but I had a conversation with a client of mine recently. He couldn't get it. He thought it was just as intelligent to have a debate about astrophysics particles on Pluto that were well researched as it was to save a rainforest that might help a native population preserve their awareness of medicine, for example, that could help people, to preserve a high quality of life for women, for example. Astrophysics particles on Pluto, helping thousands of families today and in the future, and simultaneously preserving a resource for humanity. What delivers the highest return on well-being? If $1 million can fund astrophysics research on Pluto, or can help homeless families protect a native habitat, you know, it's worth doing the analysis and to say, well, there may be sometime in the next 500 years some way that this research on Pluto would help people today. But if there are millions of highly vulnerable, suffering, traumatized people today that for pennies on the dollar can have an exponential increase in well-being and health today, it is questionable intelligence not to first prioritize the elimination of human suffering in clearly measurable metrics, particularly when we understand the viral nature of emotion, the viral nature of disease, the viral nature of weather, and the viral nature of economy. Meaning you have a collapsed economy in one country, and the global economy suffers. Why? Because they're not buying the global economy's goods. You have an Ebola breakout in one country, and everyone around the world has to spend more money to contain the disease in that country with air travel and all that stuff. So there's millions. It's very, very expensive to say we don't care about this country, so we're going to quarantine them. You have happiness. You hear on the news, you know, you're eating dinner at home, right? And you listen to the global news. Oh, another 10,000 people wiped out by this flood through clear cutting and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, is that fun? Is that really fun for you to sit and be eating peas and corn, another 10,000 dead? Or is it fun to understand that we're an intelligent species that cares enough about ourselves to care about other people, or that cares enough about other people to care about ourselves? It goes, these seeming paradoxes divide. If you're incredibly generous, make yourself into the best person you possibly can be and share it. If you're incredibly selfish, make yourself into the best possible person you can be and enjoy engaging with other great, successful people. It's the same thing. And so in this framework of intelligence, if you look at an intelligent response to a problem, you analyze all possible responses to the problem, and you figure out how to solve the problem with the least amount of time, the least amount of money, and the least amount of natural resources. And if you are the person who develops that solution and advocates for it, you are a more intelligent person than the person who says, no, 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 there's a much more expensive way to solve this problem. Why should we hire garbage men to pick up garbage on the street? We can instead train guide dogs to pick up garbage on the street. They each cost $40,000 to train. They can only pick up one piece of garbage at a time, so there'll be, endless, flurries of dogs up and down every street. You'll barely be able to drive your car, and that's part of the whole benefit. It's like you'll have traffic jams, so it'll waste lots of gas, it'll waste lots of time, it'll be 10 times more expensive. Let's do that. That's a dumb person. A dumb person advocates for a way of engaging with the world that takes significantly more natural resources, significantly more time, and significantly more money to achieve an objective that could be much easier done in an obvious alternative way. Why do we get so pissed off and think governments are dumb? We see them doing this all the time. The California smog test is a great example. So in order to reduce emissions, we have constructed thousands of dedicated buildings to which people detour from work and their daily lives, drive to the emissions test site, then they run their car at high revs for 20 minutes in the test site. And this is supposed to weed out gaseous emissions from cars. To have everyone detour 10, 20, 30 minutes of extra driving, and then run their cars so as to put less pollutants into the air, and to spend well over $1 billion in California alone just to enact this absurdity. Is that intelligent? Well, what's the alternative? What about everyone saves? What about millions of people save an hour of their time and put it in their family? And what about, rather than spending billions of dollars a year to waste time burning gas to test so as to reduce gas emissions, what if we planted 1 billion trees every single year? So people stay home, they save half the smog fee, and for every dollar, one tree gets planted in California. Well, how many billions of trees planted in California would it take to absorb the odd, rare polluter? Meaning the 1% of cars that really pollute, that this whole program is designed to penalize. This 1% of cars, how much carbon footprint do they put into the atmosphere, and how much would 1 billion trees pull out of the atmosphere? Or what about eliminating smog and giving more incentives to electric and stop wasting people's time? Electric cars, or doing both. What about taking half let's say take 1 billion and plant 1 billion trees every year, and a second billion and fund electric cars, and the third billion just give back to the people and reduce taxes and stimulate the economy? What about that? Do thousands of smog centers have to be built, and do employees have to be hired to sit there breathing toxic chemicals so that everyone can drive in and burn their engines for 20 minutes? Why not? Well, when you don't have intelligence in government, you have absurdities like this. And that's just one of thousands. Now, there is no better definition of intelligence than the efficiency with which energy, time, money, and natural resources is transformed into human well-being. None better that I know. And if you have one, what is it that you value more than making you and other people feel better sustainably? I'm not talking about crack cocaine. Yeah, it feels good for a couple of days, and then you feel worse. And then you lose your job, and then you feel even worse. And then you neglect your kids, and you feel even worse. Spending a high for a couple of weeks only to have a miserable couple of years, that's not intelligent. It's a very short-term thinking. But what if those billion trees, every single year they grow, collect more and more toxins out of the atmosphere and generate more and more clean oxygen? Reduce the storm fronts by mitigating temperature fluctuations, increase rainfall, provide more shade, reduce air conditioning bills, blah, 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 blah. This is an endlessly intelligent thing to do. So that's where I've evolved to a point where just about everything in my life that's in the back of my mind, is this the most efficient way to generate the most amount of well-being sustainably per unit of energy invested?